Have a great day, everyone. Our topic for this day is all about the language teaching approaches. First, language teaching approach is a grammar translation approach. This is the classic way of teaching language. It began as a method to teach Latin and Greek and was generalized to teach any second language. The grammar translation approach uses the student's native language to teach the target language. The approach has strong structural underpinnings, and the emphasis is on the correct use of grammar, regardless of the substance or context. This is best when the goal is for the students to read or write the target language, as well as appreciate its literature. Second one is the direct approach. It is a response to the grammar translation approach. The emphasis is on the spoken language and the development of oral skills. Only the target language is used in class. Listening and comprehension thus become central to this approach. So as a teacher, you want to use the student's mother tongue to teach concepts. Third one is the reading approach. This is a very specific approach designed for a specific type of language learner. In this approach, learning a language is employed as a means to a higher end. This approach has both structural and functional underpinnings. The type of student that most appreciates this method probably never intends to interact with native speakers in the target language. A student like this requires only one linguistic skill, the reading comprehension. Fourth one is the audiolingual approach. The audiolingual approach gives higher priority to the spoken form than the written form. Classes are generally held using the target language. Language are taught through a system of reinforcement. The end goal of this approach is the forming of linguistic speaking habits through connect repetitions. Fifth one is the communicative approach. Communicative approach seeks to develop those skills that enable students to meaningfully engage with each other. Interactive activities are the hallmark of this approach. As the teacher, your responsibility is to give the students as much opportunity to give and receive meaningful communications as possible. For example, you can let students introduce themselves, share their hobbies using the target language. Next is the silent way. The silent way uses silence as a teaching tool. Your students might feel you're giving them the silent treatment if you don't keep things friendly and explain the process to them. You're really encouraging them to do the talking themselves. Next one is the community language learning. In this approach, the students work as a community learning together and negotiating the lessons. Your role as a teacher is to encourage them to open up, participate in the discussion, and contribute to the whole process. Functional notion approach. Functional notion approach recognizes language as purposeful communication. That is, we talk because we need to communicate something. There's purpose and meaning behind the sound that comes out of our mouth. So, a teacher's first step when using this approach is to evaluate how the students will be using the language. Natural approach. Natural approach gives time for learners to simply listen and absorb the language. So, early on in the process, students don't need to speak at all. They have to observe, to read a situation, to guess the meaning of words, to make mistakes and self-correct, just like babies. In addition, the natural approach sees a difference between learning and acquisition. Total physical response. This is an approach to language teaching where gestures, actions, and movements play a vital role in language acquisition. Total physical response believes that when your students see movement and when they themselves move, their brain creates more neural connections that helps for efficient language acquisition.
Present-day teaching methods.
The spread of English era of globalization has led to a growing need for good communication skills in English. Hence, there's a strong demand for an appropriate teaching methodology. Language teaching has gone through many changes in terms of methodology used. First, the traditional approaches, which focus on the mastery of grammar, and then the communicative language teaching (CLT) emerged. According to Richard, there are different current approaches which can be viewed as falling within the general framework of communicative language teaching. First, the process-based CLT approaches, content-based instruction, and task-based instruction. Second, the product-based CLT approaches, text-based instruction, and competency-based instruction. Therefore, the main principle of communicative approaches, the learner knew grammatically correct structure, improved the ability to use language to carry out various real-world tasks. Comparison of these approaches with examples. Communicative language teaching (CLT) does a lot to expand on the goal of creating communicative competence compared to earlier methods that profess the same objective. The need for authenticity. Since real communication is a basic characteristic of CLT, classroom activities should be related to real life and provide opportunities for real communication. Authentic materials should be the basis for classroom learning, and they are not necessarily derived from authentic texts as long as the learning processes were authentic. In CLT classroom activities, the form of pair and group work requiring negotiation and cooperation between learners. Fluency-based activities that encourage learners to develop their confidence, or role plays in which students practice and develop language functions. Learner errors are accepted as an inevitable aspect of language acquisition. Learners' independence should be encouraged in learning, and teacher acts as facilitator of learning. The linguistic variation and sequencing of materials and methodology are important, according to Richard and Rogers. Process-based CLT approaches are extension of CLT but take different ways to develop learners' communicative competence. Content-based approach (CBI) creates processes by using content as the basis of classroom activities and linking all the different dimensions of communicative competence, including grammatical competence, to content. Defines CBI as teaching the language from the content being taught. In contrast, traditional approaches make decisions concerning grammar, skills, functions, etc. as the starting point in planning. The lesson, and after this decision have been made, content is selected. Next is product-based CLT approaches. It's focused more on the outcomes or products of learnings as the starting point in course design than on classroom processes. Teaching strategies are then selected to help achieve these goals. Recent teachings have focused on what learners do with extended stretches of language in authentic context of use. Next is text-based approach or TBI. It is mainly concerned with what learners do with the whole text in context. It is concerned with units of discourse called texts. Text types are identified through needs analysis and through the analysis of language as it used in different settings. Thus, TBL has much in common with an ASP approach to language teaching. However, other components of text such as grammar, vocabulary, topics, and functions usually are specified in a mixed syllabus, one which integrates reading, writing, and oral communication, and which teaches grammar through the mastery of text rather than in isolation. Lastly, the competency-based approach or CBIT is an approach to vocational education and training which focuses on the competencies gained by an individual rather than the training process itself. Next is grammar translation approach. With this method, the students learns primarily by translating to and from the target language. Instructors encourage the learner to memorize grammar rules and vocabulary lists. There is little or no focus on speaking and listening. Teachers conduct classes in the student's native language with the ESL teaching method. These methods, too, primary goals are to progress the learner's reading ability to understand literature in the second language and promote the learner's overall intellectual development. Grammar drills are a common approach. Another popular activity are translation exercises that emphasize the form of the writing instead of the content. Although the grammar translation approach was one of the most popular language teaching methods in the past, it has significant drawbacks that have caused it fall out of favor in modern schools. Principally, the students often have trouble conversing in the second language because they receive no instruction in oral skills. Background: traditional method of second language teaching in schools, most common language teaching method, and stress the literacy development and teacher-centered. Grammar translation method. It is used to be and still is the most popular teaching method. Features: abstract rules about grammar, focus on translation, memorization, rote learning, overuse of linguistic one, dominance of the written form, tests or sentences to practice grammatical items. Advantages: large class can be taught. Teachers with low level of oral ability can be used. This approach can be used at all levels. Learners can use coursebook on their own. Disadvantages: content of materials often boring and of little interest to learners, inappropriate for young learners who cannot read much, exposure to authentic spoken language absent.
We will now proceed to audiolingual. The audiolingual approach encourages students to develop habits that support language learning. The students also learn primarily through pattern drills, particularly dialogues, which the teacher uses to help students practice and memorize the language. There are 4 types of dialogues utilized in this method. First is repetition, in which the students repeats teacher's statement exactly. Second is inflection, where one of the words appears in a different form from the previous sentence. For example, a word may change from the singular to the plural. Third is replacement, which involves one word being replaced with another while the sentence construction remains the same. Lastly is restatement, where the learner rephrases the teacher's statement. This technique's name comes from order. It uses to teach language skills. It starts with listening and speaking, followed by reading and writing, meaning that it emphasizes hearing and speaking the language before experiencing its written form. Because of this, teachers use only the target language in the classroom with this TESOL method. And it is a nice option for language learning remotely and or alone, even though it's an older ESL teaching method. Unlike the reading approach, the audiolingual approach gives higher priority to the spoken form than the written form. Classes are generally held using the target language. And now, we are going to discuss about cognitive code learning. This refers to a theory of second language teaching and learning rooted in cognitivist psychology and structural applied linguistics developed in the 1960s. The theory emphasizes the central role of cognition in the conscious and explicit learning of the rules of a language as a code. The cognitive code approach to learning a second language sees it as a study of language as a complex system with the goal of gaining conscious control of the grammatical, lexical or vocabulary, and auditory patterns. Based on the foundations of linguistic theories and the findings of psycholinguistics research, cognitive psychologists and applied linguistics, such as John B. Carroll and Kenneth Chastain, advocate the cognitive code approach to the study of a second language as an alternative.